Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Fast Chats, your source for the science of endurance performance. I'm Chris with Griffin and Trevor. Today we're talking about two studies, and it's really interesting. Both found that what we might have thought previously might be wrong about two big subject matters. The first being injury in various sports and the prevalence of injury in various sports. And we'll get to it. The second one being about longevity and what promotes it, intensity or volume. Before we dive into those studies, we're excited to talk a little bit about Experience Fayetteville and Fayetteville, the city, sponsors of this episode.
Yeah, Chris, I know you've been there a couple times. I've been there once for a coaching retreat, but tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, it's an incredible place, especially for cyclists. It's the only UCI-designated bike city in the U.S. That's a huge accolade. The League of American Bicyclists sees it as a gold-level bike-friendly city. It's got something like 120 miles of trails right within city limits and some of the best gravel cycling right out the back door.
Yeah, and I know you're a bike packer. I am not, but I've heard really good things about the bike packing there.
Yeah, I am a board member for Bike Packing Routes, a nonprofit that advocates for the expansion of bike packing. And their founder, Kurt Refsnyder, bike packing legend, helped Experience Fayetteville create a whole suite of bike packing routes. Short overnighters, super long 265-mile mega loops that go out into the Ozarks. It's an incredible network of bike packing trails.
Yeah. And my one experience there is when we were taking a break from that retreat, we went outside to watch the junior mountain bike program that they coach. And first of all, incredibly embarrassed watching these 11-year-olds do things on mountain bikes that I couldn't even dream of doing. But was just blown away by, in the middle of this class, there were a bunch of other mountain bikers on these trails. And this one top pro just came over, started talking with the kids, started talking with us, did a little teaching, and then left. And
awesome.
Somebody from Boulder, and I looked at this and went, wow. The bike in here is pretty spectacular.
Yeah, and speaking of pros and speaking of spectacular racing, there's a big event coming up.
December 10th to 14th, they've got the Cyclocross Nationals there, which I'm still trying to convince you to go and race.
Well, I have been to the course before. It hosted Worlds in 2022. So I got to see Tom Pidcock and Mariana Vos win their titles that year. It was incredible to be able to ride that course.
And what's really cool is that is a permanent course. So if you want to go and ride a world champion caliber cyclocross course, head to Fayetteville, give it a try. You can ride it any day.
Absolutely. We've talked a lot about bikes. There's more to the city than just riding bikes.
I was surprised when I was there because I admit I went there expecting kind of the small town, nothing to do, and I rented an Airbnb and just went, okay, I'll just hang out and watch TV at night. But it had a really cool downtown area. Mm-hmm. Lots of restaurants. They're saying over 360 restaurants, which I believe. There were craft breweries. There were coffee shops, one that I went and did some reading in and absolutely loved. Went to a restaurant that was having some live music. I mean, it really kind of had that New Orleans or, one of those kind of hip music town type feels to it. I was really impressed.
Excellent. Fayetteville, your new favoriteville. Head to favoriteville.com to explore one of America's top-rated bike cities, where world-class cycling is just the beginning. So I know, Trevor, that you were pretty giddy, as you sometimes get when we talk about studies, about this first one when it comes to injuries in various athlete types, because this runs so counter to what we've thought for so long.
I love studies like this. I love when you have something that you take for granted. You just go, yeah, we've been reading the research on this for a while, and this is just what we know to be true. And you always get in trouble when you say that because that is the nature of science. There is no truth in science. There is only hypothesis. Mm-hmm. And when you hear a really good researcher, a really good scientist get interviewed, they'll never say, absolute, this is true.
We've proven.
Right. And unfortunately, that gets used often in the media to kind of say, oh, there's no science behind this, because when you listen to the researchers, they won't say that this is absolutely true. And it's a flip, because a good researcher will never say anything is true. I always love to say, they disprove gravity.
I mean, the media in the last 5 years also just looks for truth with a capital T.
Yeah. And it's science that doesn't exist. So I love when you get these studies that you read it, and this first one we're going to talk about, I even love the fact that they had their 3 hypotheses, which are the exact same 3 hypotheses I would have had, and they disproved all 3 of their hypotheses and their results.
What are those 3 hypotheses?
Ooh, look at that. You think I wasn't ready, don't you?
Serving it up for our fast
We
chat.
hypothesized that a greater number of completed events would increase injury incidence.
Mm-hmm.
2, cross trainers would report fewer overuse injuries than non-cross trainers. And 3, specific training modalities would be associated with overuse injury occurrence. That third one kind of was proved.
So what they're saying is that their hypotheses were the more activity you do, the more likely you will to get injured.
Yeah.
The more you cross-train, i.e. the more variety you add to your exercise regime, the less you'd be injured. And then the third one is the different sports
are going to
different
have different
modalities
rates
will have
of-
different rates.
Which is true, but it
Yes.
wasn't the ones that we thought.
Correct, yes.
So, yeah, basically what they did is they did a study where they took triathletes. So they took high-level athletes, but they took a group of triathletes and then a group of marathon runners, and then basically looked at their injury rates. Also looked at how much cross-training do they do and things like that. But taking their hypotheses, they basically show what a lot of us who train athletes in these sports thought, which is you're going to see lower rates of injury in triathletes because they do a mix of sports, which helps them. But a lot of coaches, when they train triathletes, will really say, we want to spend the bulk of your time in the pool and on the bike because those are less injury prone. If you do a lot of running, you're going to be more injured because just running is prone to injury.
Right.
So you also would believe that triathletes would have less injury rates than marathon runners because marathon runners tend to just do a huge volume of running, and that makes you more prone to injury. Plus, as coaches, we often tell our athletes cross-train in the off-season or do cross-training through the season because it prevents injury. Everything I just explained to you,
Yeah,
what they saw in the study was the exact opposite.
I know. It's crazy. Totally crazy.
So
Crazy science.
It's wild.
going through the results, running volume did correlate with injury. The more running you did, the less injury.
Crazy.
One that was expected, swimming was associated with reduced injury.
Yes. Good old
So
swimming.
that was expected. Here was the other one. I'm like, what? Cycling volume was associated with both greater upper body and lower body injury. So when I work with triathletes, I'm always like, do your volume on the bike. It's less injury prone. And this is the opposite, is what it's showing. And then cross training was associated with more upper extremity injuries.
Yeah.
So yeah, this one kind of threw me for a loop, which I love. I love getting challenged by stuff like this.
I think one thing we needed to define real quick, though, when we say injuries, are we talking about acute only or chronic? Because overuse can't necessarily be measured instantaneously like an acute injury would.
Yeah, they didn't address that in the study. At least I didn't see it.
Yeah, that would be something as a follow-up that would be interesting to me when you talk about volume. Overuse injury is going to appear differently.
Yeah.
And I will admit, because we're talking about a specific study, I even read the methodology for this one. Little no secret, most scientists kind of get to that methodology section and just kind of skip over it, which is why some journals have started putting the methodology at the end in much smaller text that nobody can read because they know nobody's going to read it.
It's one of the most important parts.
It is really important.
Would you say that their methods were sound for this study since you did read it?
Yeah, I mean, in a scientific study, you always put the limitations at the end, potential issues, and they brought up the one limitation, which is very valid, which is its self-report. They had a very large number of participants. It was 384 athletes that participated. There's no way they would have the ability to sit there and have a medical doctor constantly reviewing these athletes and looking at the injuries. So it was self-reported injuries, and it was also self-reported on their training. You know, the hope is most athletes, why would they lie about that stuff? They're going to tell you the truth.
Right.
But yeah, that is a limitation. That is an issue. And it could be they just didn't get down to that level of detail since it was self-report. They were just asking injury rates.
Can I ask a big question? Why? Why is this study running counter to what has come before it? Well, that's not totally true, but in large part, this is saying something very different from what you believed and most people believe about what causes injuries, volume, etc.
Yeah, I bet this is where I was a little disappointed in the study because when I read the abstract, I'm like, oh, this is going to be a fun study because it basically countered everything that is generally believed. So I'm like, I can't wait to get into this and see what their explanation is. When you read the actual study, the written part's only 3 pages. It's really short.
Yep.
So they don't go into that much detail, but they have a couple theories. One is with the running volume, they did bring up a chicken or the egg thing. Is it the increased running volume that's somehow causing adaptations, that's causing these athletes to have less injury?
Mm-hmm.
And they certainly showed that you see less injury in more experienced runners than less experienced runners. So there is some evidence of that. But the other possibility here is people who are just naturally resistant to injury are the only ones who can do that big running volume.
Yeah. Right.
So is it the running volume that's reducing the injury rate, or is the resistance to injury that's causing the higher running volume?
Right. And then, of course, there's the technique aspects here. The better, quote unquote, better runners or more elite runners or more experienced runners might have better form, better technique, and therefore be less injury prone.
Right. And they brought that up in the cross training. That they tried to explain why is it when we've always said cross training reduces injury, you're actually seeing higher rates. And they brought up the whole idea of unfamiliarity. The athletes aren't familiar with the particular sport, so they might not do it with good form. Their body isn't adapted to it, so it can actually initially increase injury. And I'm experiencing that right now. I'm a cyclist. We're in the fall. I've started running 3 weeks ago. I had 2 weeks of great running, and now I'm limping around because my calves and Achilles tendons are killing me.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering why you were walking weird.
I am walking very weird
At
right
least
now.
it's not your back, right?
Back is great.
That's good.
So,
Have you ever had a gait analysis?
of my running?
Yeah.
Yeah, people laugh at me as they run by me, so that's my
That was
gait
a loaded
analysis.
question the way you asked that. That was leading. You're like, by the way.
I went out for a run last night, and the best I could do because of the pain was like 11-minute miles.
The pain.
Like people were running by me, and you could tell they're just like, what is with this guy?
Did you happen to use any adaptive strategies to cope with that pain?
Yes.
Did you?
Please see episode.
Please see our last Fast Chats.
I had a point where I could have gone the long way and done another 3 miles, or go the short way and do 1.5 miles, and I did the 1.5 miles.
You did. You adapted.
That was my adaptation. I went home and got on the couch.
Okay, very good.
I think what's important, though, going back to the cross-training aspect, is that when we talk about this, we're not saying you shouldn't
Right.
do cross-training.
No, I'm still going to recommend it to athletes.
So what would be the caveat? What's the nuance you would deliver that recommendation with then?
You know, in terms of the cross training, it is be careful. There is a familiarity phase,
Mm-hmm.
and you might want to ease into it. And it might be, if you're going to do that cross training, something that you want to do consistently, or be ready for the fact that you might have short-term injuries. So for me, for example, you know, I run for 3 months of the year, and then I have 9 months where I don't run at all. And if I'm going to keep doing this, perhaps I should be just making sure I'm running through the year,
Yeah.
so I don't lose that familiarity.
And that's what I've done for the last probably 5 years, is primarily in the summer months, the warmer months, I am a cyclist, but I still try to run once a week just to have that in the legs.
Yep.
The other thing that I would say here, and I don't know that this goes to the study itself, it's just a general caution for cyclists out there who may have quite a big engine, and then they might want to run a little bit, and they have the aerobic capacity to go fast, but their musculature, their bodies, the chassis is not ready to go at the speeds that their engine wants to take them on a bike, because they don't want to run slow. They don't want to do 12-minute miles. That's not running to them. That's just not enough for them. So they go out and they start running immediately faster than they should, faster than their body's ready to. And that's what will lead to a lot of injuries.
I think picking almost like a menu of cross-training methods that you want to rely on throughout the year, like pick 3 that you and your coach can align on, that you can really gain that, as Trevor said, familiarity with, and a little bit of an expertise in, so that you can select from that menu at any time. And it's not novel. And maybe that's the way to approach this, is that your cross-training menu should be steady, reliable, not a novel cross-training approach.
The other thing I'm going to bring up, they said that you basically saw no difference in injury rates between triathletes and runners. And again, the common wisdom here would be running is high impact. People who are doing a high volume of running should be more prone to injury and imbalances.
Yeah.
Where triathletes, because they're doing the mix of sports. So one potential explanation for this is they're not saying both groups have no injuries. It could be that we're right that runners, because of the high impact, the high volume, and the imbalances, are getting a fair amount of injury. But triathletes aren't getting the benefits from doing a mix of sports that we thought they were getting, and they're also getting high rates of injury.
Yeah.
And if that is the case, then what you are seeing is runners might be countering some of the injury by that familiarity. They get better neuromuscular recruitment. They're really making sure that they're running with good form and doing everything possible to reduce the potential for injury, which they can do because they're so focused on the one sport. But I go back to that great study where they looked at the difference between triathletes and cyclists in terms of the co-activation of muscles in their legs, which is a bad thing. And what you saw was very low levels of co-activation in elite cyclists, where in triathletes, the level of co-activation was the same as recreational cyclists, people just getting on a bike, because they weren't doing that neuromuscular training. So what you might see with triathletes is even though swimming is reducing their injury risk, because they aren't doing the same sort of form work and neuromuscular work that a cyclist would do on a bike or a runner would do running, they're actually seeing higher rates of injury. And so to me, this would be an argument that you need to be doing neuromuscular work, whatever sport you're doing. And again, one of the best ways to do neuromuscular work is in the gym. And I would have loved if they had in this study differentiate the people who are spending time in the weight room and who aren't, because I think that would probably have been very informative.
Yeah.
I will die on this hill that Chris is. I will die on this hill. The neuromuscular aspect you cannot neglect for anyone. I would even say non-athletes as well. It has to be a part of your daily regimen or weekly regimen.
Yep. Which kind of leads to the next study, even though the specific one we're going to talk about, we're going to get into aging, doesn't go into strength work. I have other studies on aging that really show you want to age well, you need to be in the gym. You need to lift weights. Whether you're an endurance athlete or whatever type of athlete you are, that strength training component is just critical.
Well, before we move on, let me just give you the title of that journal article that we were just discussing. It's called An Exploratory Retrospective Study on Injury Occurrence in Triathletes and Marathon Runners. It came out this year, 2025. And that's in the International Journal of Sports Physical Therapy.
So what's our next study, Chris? Do you want to give the title or should I?
Yeah, I'll read it.
No, wait, I got to read it. You can give the author.
Okay.
Chris is excited about this. I didn't even notice this. And Chris was like, instantly, look at that. Intensity or volume, the role of physical activity in longevity. This is also a just published study from the European Journal of Preventative Cardiology. First author, Schwendinger.
Fabian Schwendinger, Dennis Infanger, Eric Lichtenstein, Timo Hinrichs, Raphael Kneier, Alex Rollins, and Arno Schmidt-Truxas.
So this study is a more complex study, and it's a really interesting study. We do need to address the methodology a little bit from the start because it is important. It is an epidemiological study, which means they are looking for correlations. They can't say cause. So when you do that, you have what are called hazard ratios, which, again, I'm just going to simplify all this. They're basically saying if you do X, your potential risk of Y is this. And they state whether that risk is beyond chance or not. And most of what they're showing here is, yes, the risk is beyond chance. So what they use is NHANES data. So think of this as researchers that just collect data so that other researchers can analyze the data. So they do these giant studies where they have tens of thousands of people that participate, and they just collect huge amounts of health and nutrition and exercise data on these people for years and years and years. So the whole thing about cholesterol came out of the Framingham study, which was done in the town of Framingham, Massachusetts, where basically everybody who lived there participated. And they tracked the people for 20 years. And that data was used for a lot of purposes. NHANES is another set of data. There's actually multiple sets of NHANES data where there's just a whole group that collects all this data. They don't do anything with it, but researchers can come in and say, we would like to use this particular subset of data within the NHANES. Can you please give it to us, and then we'll analyze it?
Yeah.
So that's what happened here. And they used, I think, about 7,518 participants. So it was a large number. What's important here is they used a subset of the NHANES data from 2011 to 2014, where all the participants use activity monitors, 24-hour monitors. But here's what's really important. These people were tracked for over a decade, but they only wore those monitors for 7 days. So you could see what their activity level was like for those 7 days. But you are making an assumption that for those next 10 years, their activity level remained consistent, which is really hard to make.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the biggest flaw I find with this study.
Yep. The other issue here is it's not like these people were unaware that they were wearing activity monitors. And this will become important later. You could see a scenario where people who were completely sedentary went, oh, there's an activity monitor on me. I don't want them to see that I spend my whole day on the couch. So I should go out and get some walks in. And a lot of those people who are completely inactive probably don't want to go out and do really intense work.
Yeah. They're just going to walk around.
They're just going to go out and walk around. But that might not actually be their typical behavior. So that's important to factor in here because we're looking at the difference between intensity versus volume of low intensity exercise. And again, they aren't looking at elite athletes. So when they're talking about intensity, they're talking about really brisk walk or slow jog. I mean, there might be some people who are racing in here, but it's mostly looking at your average population.
Right.
So where do we want to start?
Well, I mean, this one also runs counter to what we've seen before in other research.
It does, not as much as some of the others. The very first Fast Chats episode, we looked at a study, which I actually grabbed, that was sprint and endurance training in relationship to redox balance, inflammatory status, and biomarkers of aging in masters athletes. And the short version of this, so they're looking at telomere length, which is a major predictor of aging, how long you're going to live and how healthy you're going to live. It showed that sprint athletes saw a lot better indicators than endurance athletes, which I hate seeing that. So I hate sprinting. But this is just the way it is.
Yeah.
So this is different. It's not quite as, oh my God, that's the exact opposite of what we thought.
Yeah. But
But
this is
still
this is
continues that
cardiovascular disease that they're kind of looking at.
So they're looking at all-cause mortality.
Yep.
And they're also looking at cardiovascular disease. And look, we raised the issues. They didn't even collect the data. They're using the NHANES data, so they're stuck with that. But they did do some good things. Like they eliminated anybody from the study that already had cardiovascular disease. And this is a little morbid, but they eliminated anybody from the study who died within the first 12 months because there would be mitigating factors there.
Sure.
And that is important. I've talked about this before. I think we've mentioned on the show, there's this study that used similar sort of data and showed that the more salt you consume, the less risk of cardiovascular disease. But they didn't remove people that had cardiovascular disease at the start of the study. And the issue is, when you are diagnosed with cardiovascular disease, your doctor tells you get salt out of your diet. So basically, the study showed that a low-salt diet had a very high risk for heart disease. But it wasn't that the low-salt diet was causing heart disease. It was heart disease was causing the low-salt diet.
Right.
And when somebody corrected that and fixed the data, yeah, you saw a straight-line relationship of the more salt you consume, the higher the risk of heart disease. So they did a good job of controlling for some of those factors here. But yeah, the short of it is, certainly they showed inactivity is your highest risk for heart disease and all-cause mortality. So if you're just sitting on the couch, you're right from the start at high risk.
Why does the couch always get the bad rap?
Okay, when you're sitting in the bed?
I don't know.
I don't know.
He prefers the Chase Lounge.
The chaise lounge.
Chaise Lounge.
If you're just a
The
chaise
lazy
lounge
boy?
potato, the lazy, that is where you should take it. The lazy boy, because
lazy boy.
it's right there in the name.
The first team I ever raced for was Lazy Boy Cycling.
Really?
We were sponsored by Lazy Boy.
Wow, that's amazing.
And they used to have us come in front of the Lazy Boy store and sit on our trainers. They'd have half the team sit on the trainers riding, half the team sit on Lazy Boys out on the lawn
Wow.
in front of the Lazy
To
Boy
get the
store.
team photo?
Just
Can we
to
get
encourage people to
photographic
come in.
evidence?
Those photos are somewhere. I did not keep a single one.
Oh, that's too bad. That's a great sponsor.
Lazy boy, if you hear this, please resurface those photos.
The best part of it is when I was in a race and sitting at the back of a group and not taking polls, and people would yell at me. I'd be like, I'd point at my shirt and go,
Lazy
read
boy.
it.
I'm doing my job.
Going back to the study, inactivity, absolutely, you're at the highest risk. So increasing volume of activity is going to produce improvements.
Mm-hmm.
But it only reduced all-cause mortality. I shouldn't say only. You generally don't want to die, so that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
But intensity reduced the risk more,
Mm-hmm.
or the correlation. See, I got to be careful because it isn't causal. So the correlation was less. And also intensity was the only one that correlated with lower heart
rates.
disease.
Yeah.
And what they say through the study is, well, volume is important. What is more important is the intensity that you are doing during that volume of training. So again, it comes back to just going out and getting activity is certainly beneficial. But if you are really trying to live a long, healthy life, intensity is important. And again, let's be aware of the audience of our show. This is athletes.
Yeah.
When they talk about intensity, they're probably talking about zone 3, maybe some zone 4. They're not talking about tons of sprint work and super high intensity.
Right. And we obviously are not recommending that anybody that is training for an event just go out and because these things we're talking about completely different things, performance versus health.
That's where I struggle the most when we bring in public health research on this podcast, because I always want to highlight all the asterisks. You can't just cleanly transcribe this data over to an athlete population.
Yeah.
So I think anybody listening to this, you're fine. You're getting enough intensity. We're not saying you have to stop going out for long rides and just go and do sprints. It's the exact opposite. As a matter of fact, another really important thing that they researched here was whether continuous versus just getting the intensity through the day was important. And that was sparked by the fact that the World Health Organization has changed their recommendations. They used to say you need to get at least 10 minutes of continuous exercise most days. World Health Organization has now changed that to every minute counts, meaning it doesn't matter, accumulate minutes of exercise. It could be you do a minute here, you do a minute there, you do a minute later, and you never do your 10, 15, or whatever minutes of continuous exercise. So they did look at that in this study. And they said, we're not going to counter the World Health Organization recommendations. If you can get exercise, get exercise.
Mm-hmm.
But when they compared people who were getting a similar volume of intensity and volume of exercise, but one group was doing it in short bursts through the day, another group was getting continuous exercise of at least 5 minutes. I'm not talking hours
Small
and hours.
bouts. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But continuous exercise, you saw a 72% reduced risk in the people that got the continuous exercise. So it was substantial. It was significant. So they didn't want to say throw the recommendations out, but they are saying they probably should have kept the recommendation of you need continuous exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully, that's less of a concern with this population. No
Yes.
one's going on 30-second
Right.
bike rides out there. So,
Runs. Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
Well, let's turn our attention to the aging aspect here. Do they see any difference between intensity versus volume when it came to that?
Yeah. So the whole purpose of the study is looking at healthy aging.
Mm-hmm.
And they did point out the fact that unfortunately, as you age, the risk of heart disease, the risk of obviously all-cause mortality increases with age. And that's just part of the aging experience.
Mm-hmm.
But they did show real interesting differences between volume and intensity. And there's this great graph in there that's color-coded, and I had to spend a lot of time trying to get and understand this graph. But let's start with the volume side. And they separated men and women. And they then separated both groups into percentiles. So, for example, people who are in the 95th percentile of volume, getting the most volume,
Mm-hmm.
versus people that are in the 5th percentile of volume, they're doing almost no exercise. And what you saw in both men and women, people that were down in that 5th or 10th percentile, even at the age of 20, are at high risk. You just see them stay there. It declines a little bit, but they're basically at high risk their whole life. It's not a good place to be. What you see with the people who are doing a lot of volume, they're in the green. They're very low risk when they're young. But if all they're doing is volume and not getting that intensity, even the people in the highest percentile of volume end up going into moderate to high risk as they age. By the time you're 80, you're in that moderate to high risk.
I know this doesn't necessarily apply to our audience here, but what do they define as high volume in these people? Do you
So
remember?
they're doing it as percentile. So I think when you're getting into this 95th percentile, you're probably talking about people that are like us getting 10 plus hours a week that are doing high volume.
Yep.
So, those lower percentiles, it's more sedentary, 3, 4. Like even the 50th percentile, you're probably talking about somebody that's getting 3, 4 hours a week. But my guess, 95th percentile, that's where we lie.
10 plus, 12, yeah.
So that does apply to us. It does apply to our audience listening to this. If all you are doing is volume, you're still going to be, as you age, at higher risk of heart disease and other conditions. The shape of the intensity graph is very different. It's the same thing, broken into percentiles from people that are getting a lot of intensity to people that are getting very little intensity. And what you see there is everybody starts in the green. But people who are getting very little intensity, they really plummet as they age. They go very high risk even at younger ages. Like even in their 50s, you're getting into high risk. Where people that are getting a lot of intensity, so the people in that 90th, 95th percentile, it's almost a straight line, a horizontal line. They start green, even 80, 90 years old. And this is hypothetical. I don't think they had anybody in the study who was actually 90 by the end of the study, but they stay in the green. And more importantly, this is true of both men and women. Though in women, you see a greater increase in risk in the people that get very little intensity. But the people who are getting a lot of intensity, it's kind of a flat line. And even at the age of 80, their risk of all-cause mortality is lower than 20-year-olds that are doing very little intensity or no intensity. So basically what this is showing is you need the volume. If you don't get the volume, you're at high risk. But that's not enough. If you want to age well, you need the intensity.
This paper was incredibly visual. The number of graphs and even the tombstone graphic that was included. I don't know why we're assuming all are Christian. I'd appreciate like a Star of David tombstone and a couple others. But when we link to the study, I think this paper is full of a lot of graphics that if usually papers are hard for you to get through, this definitely has some helpful graphics.
Obviously, we will include links to these articles so that people can check them out themselves, because that was a good explanation, but words can't do all of these graphics justice. So it helps to see them and understand the arc or the lack of an arc on some of these graphs that you were talking about.
But I mean, I will give you an example. So my girlfriend, Alina, to be expected, because this is the way it is for everybody, I work in the health space. This is what I do for a living. So when I give her recommendations on exercise and nutrition, she ignores everything I say. And instead, she listens to influencers on social media. And there's this one woman who is our age, so mid-50s, that she listens to all the time. And this woman has been saying, all you ever need to do is go out and walk. Just get long walks. You don't need to run. You don't need to do intensity. This is all you need to be healthy. And just recently, this influencer admitted she just got diagnosed with osteoporosis and she has other health issues, and said flat out, I've been giving all of you the wrong advice, which is what I had been telling Alina, that, it's good you're going out and walking every day. And she does like hour and a half long walks. So I'm like, that is healthy for you. But unless you are running, unless you're doing intensity, you're still going to have health issues. And this study is basically saying exactly that. So my girlfriend, she's not an elite athlete. She is the target of this study. And so anybody listening to this, that doesn't really apply to you, but you probably have family members and friends who are more recreational, and this is important for them to know. But going back to, again, athletes, so we saw that one that we covered before, that sprint athletes seem to see better signs of aging. So I looked, are there more? And I did find a bunch more studies that continue this intensity, strength work are more important for healthy aging, even in athletes. And so here's another one. The impact of lifelong strength versus endurance training on muscle fiber morphology and phenotype composition in older men. And we talked about this on the show before, but what you see as you age is you have in your muscles neuromuscular units. So one nerve will innervate multiple fibers. And one neuromuscular unit will be type 1 fibers. Another will be type 2 fibers. What you see, particularly in sedentary individuals, is as they age, fibers will disconnect from a neuromuscular unit and become orphans. If they're an orphan, they can't fire. They often will re-innervate, but they'll attach to a different motor unit. And they usually attach to a type 1 muscle fiber unit. And then if they were a type 2 fiber before, they convert to a type 1. More importantly, you end up then with fewer and fewer neuromuscular units, which means your ability to control those muscles is reduced. So that's why you see people when they're older have a harder time walking and do shuffle walking and things like that. It's one of the contributing factors. So one thing you really want to do as you age is avoid this orphaning of muscle fibers. And basically what this study shows is that, I'll go right down to the conclusions. Strength-trained masters athletes were characterized by similar muscle morphology as young. You just don't see this in strength training athletes, which was not the case for recreational active or endurance-trained old. So this was looking at athletes. Endurance athletes who aren't in the weight room still see this effect. So these results indicate that strength training may preserve type 2 fibers with advancing age in older men, likely as a result of chronic use of high contractile force generation. So yet another sign that if we want to age well, just doing slow endurance work ain't going to cut it.
And going back to the example of the influencer with Alina, for women, especially considering osteoporosis and you're getting to a certain age or your hormones are having a variety of changes happening between your 40s and 60s, there's studies like the Lift More study. To continue your point of not just being on the bike, you need to make sure that your bones have a variety of impact, load, variation as well.
This is where you have to be careful about the misconceptions, because with Alina, I did convince her to do box jumps a couple times a week. And she's seen huge benefits from that. She used to wake up with her knees and ankles being really sore and just struggling to get out of bed. Now she's like, it doesn't affect me at all.
Yeah.
But she went to see her doctor and told her doctor she was doing the box jumps. The doctor went, don't do that. You're postmenopausal. You can't do anything with impact.
It makes me so uncomfortable. It's not like she's doing 3-foot box jumps.
No, she's doing a 14-inch.
Yeah. And again, if anyone who hasn't been doing this, you need to go get expert input on your form and how to do this safely and learn what you need to do. But this stuff is incredibly important. This impact, the load, don't go wild and don't do it independently.
Right.
That was another episode of Fast Chats. The thoughts and opinions expressed on Fast Chats are those of the individual. Subscribe to Fast Talk wherever you prefer to find your favorite podcast. Hey, don't forget, we're now on YouTube. Go there, help us, subscribe, and watch. As always, be sure to leave us a rating and a review. To learn more about the episode, from show notes to those references, visit us at fasttalklabs.com. And to join the conversation on our forum, go to forums.fasttalklabs.com. For Griffin and Trevor, I'm Chris. Thanks for listening.